All right, let's get into it. Another talk, leadership in tough places. And today we're celebrating our diversity. Come on. We've got a senior in our midst. He gets in the movies for half price. Some would call that ageism, but here we are. No, we're diving in today, and what I want to talk about is actually starting a location. I'm titling this talk, Start a Location. The reason I want to go back to this is it really is within the fabric of our mission. And I think it's going to be helpful to us as we consider, as we have stabilized and are growing again and kind of reinvigorating our mission. When we start locations again, we need to be reminded, how do we do this? Why do we do this? And maybe we're closer than we think. So I wanted to go through this. But before I walk you through kind of how to start or our process for starting a location, I want to go back to how we started our second location. Okay. And Pastor Derek's here. He was that second location's location pastor. And he started out as the location director, part-time. And, we didn't know what we were doing. Okay. So we started our first location in Port Richmond. As you know, they wouldn't let us do a third service. From the start of our church, the Block Church, our initial tagline was one block at a time. So within all of us, within our vision, we always wanted to be multi-site. We just didn't know when or how. When we couldn't go to a third service because we were at a catering hall, we said, well, now's the perfect time. Let's just go start a location downtown. And while that was a noble gesture, it was not the way to do it. And we did it anyway. So we went down to Center City. We started a location. I like to call that location, when we started it, a premature baby, because it didn't cook long enough. It wasn't in the oven long enough. And so it had issues for years. We started off, our teams were coming down from the morning downtown. We didn't have a location pastor. It was really messy, and we could have killed our original church, our location, and we could have really not, but by the grace of God, it worked. We ended up, we had two part-time location directors, Derek being one of them. And then eventually we got smart. We need location pastors. Derek becomes the location pastor, and the rest is history. But we did it wrong. And I want to kind of illuminate today how you know it's time, how you know you can start a location. This is going to be a good reminder for us, okay? So I've got 7 basically M's. I'll move through them quick. And something you should know about this episode is really, we got to come back to this. I'm not going to give everything. I think we can break this down into multiple layers. But I'm going to give us some basic things. Here's the first one. When you want to start a location, mission is first. Mission is first. What I mean by that is, for us, our original language was one block at a time, the Block Church, one block at a time. Our initial idea was parish model, small neighborhood churches. That's really never changed. We did, however, think that one block at a time was trite, and people were stealing it and using it, and it was overused. So we changed to revive every block. In fact, I believe Stephen, our production director, came up with that because it was such a great, short, sweet, but aggressive emphasis on our mission. Revive every block. Everywhere we go, whether it's locations, groups, you name it, that's our mission. We want to see revival on every block. But one of the ways that happens is we start locations. So in our mission, multi-site is in our mission. That is our purpose, to go in the city to as many places as possible. I think one thing that churches and ministries don't consider is they want to start things, particularly locations, because planting churches and planting locations are two different things. When you plant a church, you need money, you need a venue, you need people. Okay. And while that is true and the same for for locations, the strategy is different. For us, it is in our mission to do locations. So we say no to other things, even no to planting churches, although we give a lot of money to see churches planted. We are not a church planting church. We are a location planting church. And so you've got to determine within your mission, is this part of your DNA and what you feel God has calling you to do? Okay, so mission is first. Here's the second one I have. Model is mandatory. If you don't clarify your model, if we don't clarify our model, what happens is you kind of go into it and wish for good luck. It's exactly, in a sense, what we did with our Center City location. Now, that taught us a lot about clarifying our model. And this is for another talk and another episode, but I'll give you some examples. Is your music styles reproducible? For instance, like I want us to do the most radical gospel songs ever. Now, we can't do that at every place. Okay, these are small things that like you've got to be committed to the mission and to the model. And if you try to do a bunch of different things, it's not going to work. Are you a good enough preacher for video? Is video teaching your model? Is it hybrid? What are the responsibilities of location pastors, campus pastors? Can you secure long-term viable rentals? For us, and again, this is another talk, but one of our models is we committed early on, we're not going to go do setup and tear down at places where we have to bring in trailers. So we always look for places that have on-site storage. That's one of the things that is important to us. Part of the model. Social media even, like who gets a handle? Well, we committed long ago, we're one church, not a bunch of different places. Not everybody's getting a handle. It might make sense for one place, not another. Venues and the venue conversation is, again, it's another talk. The point I'm making is for us, our model. So the way that we see it is we think one location has to be large and a mothership, maybe even two. We could do that at some point. But our locations, we feel like in the city, particularly, we want to build neighborhood-oriented, community-driven, outreach-oriented, family-driven churches, locations. So for us, when you in the city, speaking of our model, in the city, when we approach 150 people, that's check mark number one. That is success. It also allows us, what we've determined is you can probably pay a full-time pastor at 150 people. Okay, that's success. The next layer is when you break 200, you're humming because we know now we're starting to think about, you get to 200, 250, now we have to start thinking about multiplication. When you arrive at 300, it's probably too many people now based on the kind of venue sizes we're looking for. So now we're thinking multiplication. Now, there are seasons where you slow up on multiplication for the health of the staff, the team. And so will you sit there at 300 for a while? Possibly. Can we move people around? But ultimately, we're not trying to build video venues or receiving sites more than that. We really want to get to step number 150, check that off. That is a viable, secure location. Anything after that is bonus. And now what we're trying to do is consider multiplication. You gotta determine, and that helps us. So we bought a building for our Port Richmond location. Well, we bought this building in mind so that, they've got 200 chairs. But we know that's perfect for what we're trying to do. We know that this model of 200 chairs and this price point, like this is reproducible. All right, number 3, how do we know? Well, your ministry has momentum. Some people try to start locations with no ministry momentum to try to spur momentum. Well, I don't know if that's a good idea. I think it's the same thing with buildings. Some people think that buying buildings is going to spur momentum. You should already be growing and have momentum before you go purchase a big property. I think the same goes for locations. Get one thing right before you go and try to do something else and totally complicate your life. And I want to say something about multi-site. It is complicated, and we have accepted that. Sometimes I don't. But it is complicated. It causes more staff. It causes us to work together in a more unified way. And culture drifts if we're not committed to this mission and model. And so when your ministry doesn't have momentum, even if that is your mission and model, you got to slow up and focus on what you have to create some momentum for it. Number 4, and this is really huge. You have to make leaders fast. If you're going to be a multi-site church and start a location, making leaders fast and making great leaders, it has to be at the root of everything we do. Because if we want to, people ask all the time, how do you multiply quickly? Well, we multiply quickly because really our bread and butter, although some might disagree, we know our bread and butter is our volunteer culture and getting folks to serve. Within that, within our culture and structure of serving, we are trying to make great volunteer leaders. If we don't have great field teams, we're not going to develop great leaders. If we don't develop leaders, we can't multiply. There has to be an obsession with making leaders and making them fast. It's how we multiplied and how we multiply quickly is we've got a leadership pipeline. Again, for another talk, how do we do that? But you want to start a location. This is really important. Number 5, money has margin. Not a good idea to start a location when you barely got any money in the bank. You got to have margin because it takes those locations time to be financially stable. So, obviously when you're starting a location, one of the things we didn't do with Center City, and we did this with Northeast. I'm going to show you a contrast. We started in Port Richmond. We're only allowed to do 2 services. So we said, we need a 3rd service. Let's send that 3rd service downtown. Okay. But we didn't consider where people lived. What's funny is after we started the Center City location, the venue where we were at in the morning, they said, well, now you can do a 3rd service. So we ended up able to do a 3rd service in the morning after we launched the evening Center City location, the 2nd one. That location grew when we started to do it right. That had 2 services. Then we had 3 services in the morning. But then we got smart and we're like, well, we've got 100 people coming down from the Northeast section of our city into Port Richmond. That's where we should go next. All this momentum is from there. And we have a money source there. And so what we did is we donated that 3rd service into the Northeast section where there was a little bit of a money source as well as a people source. And we had financial margin to do this because we knew even though there was a little bit of a money source and people source, it was still going to take time for that to be viable. And so you might be ready to multiply with people and with momentum, but the money's not caught up yet. It is a dance. It's a dance. The money will come, but you also, it's a balance. It's a dance. It's like, okay, I've got enough, but I also have to extend faith. Yeah. You can't wait forever to where all the money's there and it's easy peasy. This is why end of the year offerings are good. You're planning for it. You're communicating ahead of time. But you can't wait till it's all there, but you also have to have some there. So you got to have some financial margin so that you give those locations time. For us, we feel like we can make a location relatively financially viable within 18 months. Number 6, this is really important. You have to master culture. Master culture. One of the hardest things about multi-site, and I learned this, is when you do 2, everybody can be there. But when you do 3, it breaks, right? Craig Rochelle gave this example in one of his leadership talks that it's like when you have one kid And you have 2 parents, it's 2-on-1. When you have 2 kids, it's 1-on-1. When you have 3, you're playing zone. Well, for us, I think we were having some major cultural challenges during our 3rd location because our church was growing faster than our staff and our money could keep up. And then we were having all this influx of new people, and culturally we were feeling disconnects, which is, by the way, why we choose to do video preaching. We feel like it's one of the best connectors for culture. So we choose, and we know that that forces us to grow slower, but we choose slower growth because culture is so important. And so one of the things that I think is really important for us and for those listening and watching is you want to start a location. You want to make sure that you don't have cancerous culture. It's not going to be perfect, but you want to make sure that culture is strong in your church and strong enough to send somebody. You're not sending a location pastor that you've hired from the outside that hasn't been with you for a while, or it's got to be family. There's got to be a cultural connect, or else this is where you get into trouble. You got to master culture. And again, breaking down culture for another talk, but it's important to understand that culture, it carries and it's infectious and it goes with you when you go. Last one, number 7 is the moment right. Is the moment right? Sometimes opportunities present themselves. A great venue, you weren't expecting it. A big check comes in. Sometimes you have an influx from people from a neighborhood, but you feel that tension, that whisper of the Lord going, hold on. Or some unexpected things are happening where you're like, wow, this wasn't our plan, but we feel like this could happen. A building's given to you. I think one of the really important pieces to starting locations is that even if it's in your mission, even if it's in your model, the moment may not be right. And that's one of those things with your team, with your leaders, you have to assess, are our leaders strong enough? Can we backfill? It's going to take faith. You're going to have holes, but is it going to deplete you? Okay, that's a whole different ballgame. Is the moment right? Are there ways to keep growing without doing this? A question that I'm asking lately is, I know this is in our mission and model. I know this is part of how we grow and reach people. But is there any other way we can avoid another location right now? I'm asking those questions to myself, and I'm thinking to myself, is that the Holy Spirit trying to work out with me? It's not the time. Or is it the Holy Spirit, is it me not wanting to be obedient because I know the cost of the leadership paid? Is the moment right? You got to wrestle, you have to fast, you have to pray. So I want to review quick because I know that this is something we have to come back to. But starting a location, mission is first. Is it in your mission? Number 2, have you clarified your model? It's mandatory. Number 3, does the ministry have momentum? Number 4, are you making leaders fast enough? Number 5, do you have some financial margin? Number 6, are you mastering or have you mastered culture? And number 7, is the moment right? And as we listen to this, as you watch this, ask yourself, is this the right moment? That's what I'm asking myself.